Hi, it's Harry. You know, what a difference a week makes. We've seen our second most powerful government official resign, that being our Crystia Freeland, our economics deputy prime minister, as well as our finance minister. Additionally, we've seen the housing minister resign for personal reasons. Canada's governments are in a turmoil, and we're facing a new uh, U.S. government, that being the Trump government. So, what does that mean for Calgary real estate? It's taken me some days to think about it for my business background and looking on the internet. Well, the market has spoken to some degree because what we've seen is the S&P and the TSX indices have gone negative since the Trump, as well as most recently the uh, resignations of our top ministers in finance and housing. So the market has basically given a negative report card on the Canadian economy. And it's not just tax loss selling. That's my belief anyway. So what does it all mean? Well, here's my opinion, and mine alone. What we know is that for Calgary real estate, things that have been affecting it have been net migration and to some degree lower interest rates. People have held off buying, expecting lower interest rates to happen. And that in its own right has slowed our market, as well as obviously Christmas season, where folks have decided not to purchase things uh, because no one likes to move during Christmas. It's more of a celebratory event that creates a bit of a lower supply because no one wants to sell either, as well as it also creates lower buying and lower opportunity. But it also represents an opportunity for those in the market if you're so inclined to purchase. Although the supply and the selection is low, this is kind of a slow portion of the market where you can potentially pick up a deal. Because what we've seen traditionally in our Calgary real estate market is come the spring market, which could be as early as this year with pent up demand and people staying on the sidelines, as early as late January, early February, you could see a movement in Calgary pricing if we didn't have these political events happening place. Um, what does that mean? It is not unreasonable, and you can see the trends. You can go back in history. It's just not my numbers or my saying so, where things move. And it's not like a 1% movement, it's a 5% movement. So if you think the average price of the Calgary home, which is roughly a little over 600,000, and that includes anywhere from an apartment to a detached single family home, 5% movement is 30 grand. And I don't think savings on interest can make up for that 30 grand movement. Yeah, you can pay it back over the long term, but if you spread that thing over a long term, yes, it's not a lot of money per month, per year, but if you look at the multiples, you're probably at that 30 grand becomes 60 grand because it's amortized over a 25-year plus period. It's easily double or more. So bear that in mind. The other side of it is obviously it's more affordable because if you spread the payments out over a longer period, you can afford it, but you essentially pay more for it. And it moves quickly. We've seen movements very quick in the spring market in the past, whether it was the COVID years when people were trying to get an opportunity and everyone's sitting on the sidelines with that same issue this year. So, what do I think with all these events happening? I think overall, I expect the market to be, on average, flat to maybe a slight decrease. The high scenario would be if we didn't have economic events, an easy 5% bump. Why do I say this? Why is that 5% bump occurring if we didn't have any of these events? Well, we've already seen the Canadian dollar sink from the mid 70s, 75 cents to sub 70, around 69 cents. That bakes in a 10% reduction in the buying power of the Canadian dollar. And why is that important? Well, it affects the the disposable income of most people, because now in all the goods you buy, and we buy a lot of it from the US, over half of it. And if we're seeing a 10% bump there, and half of it comes to the US, it's easy to see a 5% inflation on most of your goods that you buy. And if that's the case, and we've seen all the labor settlements, at least in the near year, people are asking for at least 5% more. So that bakes in almost a 5% increase across the way in most goods, which includes housing. So my belief is, if we didn't have any of these events, I would have expected a conservative 5% increase in housing prices. But the elephant in the room is the economic turmoil, whether caused by the US and their threats of tariffs, and our economic events happening here. What will that cause? That's the biggest conundrum. We run into a case where, although we're not in a technical recession, I think we are in a recession. I've spoken about this before, where we have gone through 6 quarters of GDP per capita dropping, not total GDP, because the technical definition is 2 quarters of total GDP decreases. But this is 6 quarters of GDP per capita decreasing. So in my books, that's a recession. Economists will disagree with me, but everyone's been to the grocery store or buying stuff and trying to figure out where their dollars are going, and I think you all agree with me that it feels like a recession. On the other side, what does that all mean? Well, here's the thing. Even a mild tariff will, I think, force Canada into a recession. And that recessions tend to reduce the prices across the board of everything. Your buying power falls. But the other side of it, on recessions, is you get layoffs and higher unemployment. That reduces the demand and maybe brings our housing back into balance. Unfortunately, not for the good reasons. But how does that affect the Calgary scenario? Well, Calgary has become a drop-off point. Our net migration has been at an all-time high. If you believe we're in a recession where prices drop, but if people can't afford their new mortgages because of a recession or layoffs and everything else, you can expect that while we think Calgary is somewhat affordable, you got to believe that the Vancouver area and the Toronto area are not affordable on a recession environment. There'll be a lot of foreclosures there. So in that market, I'd be definitely negative on the market. Overall, I think the prices will fall if any of these economic events come to play. But their loss may be actually our gain. Unfortunately, not the gain we want, because you'd hope prices would fall in Calgary, because if someone can't afford to live in the GTA or the Greater Vancouver Regional District, they're coming here, because here is affordable. We've said the unemployment in Alberta is higher than everywhere else on a national average, and it's borne out by the numbers that, yeah, it's higher, but the only reason why it's higher is everyone's come here. So it's not that the employers are laying people off. We can't find room to put people into for jobs. So you think that would slow it down, but slowing it down is one thing, but if you can't afford to live in those other 2 places, you're coming here. So here's the question. Would those effects basically balance out our housing prices? Any drops? So that's why I'm saying, on balance, the official answer is we're flat. The worst case scenario, we're slightly down, because if you look past this year, I've been in Calgary for a long time, through some of the recession periods. Prior to COVID, we were trading in this tight band between 500 and 550, a 10% band. So for me, we could be back into this 10% band while these things sort themselves out. On that being the scenario. Well, on the upside of that scenario, it also talks of, if everyone comes here, the prices are going up. We saw that effect over the last year or so. So that's my view. What does it say if you're a buyer? A buyer says, you know what? Not a good time to buy, not a good time to sell. But you know what? If you can buy it now prior to the bump up, take any benefit you can get. Because a 5% bump up in a tightening environment where you now qualify is probably a good time to buy. The spring market will push you upward. You're living on borrowed time because when the president moves in and the tariffs start to occur, underwriting may change. So that's the issues you're facing. Underwriting changes, pricing changes. I've always believed that if you looked after the downside, the upside will look after itself. Unless you decide, hey, I'm not going to buy it all. And then that's a fair thing. You sit out the situation. But if you're chasing a stock, a rising stock, and everything in Calgary suggests a rising stock, even in the doldrums, you'll never win this game. Because salary increases do not seem to track inflationary increases of housing for the last 5 to 10 years. So don't play that game, if that's a piece of advice I can give someone. You know, everyone says you're in sales, you're trying to promote the sales, but I'm trying to give you my viewpoint on what I'm seeing from all the years of investing and bought properties. So that's my opinion. If you can afford to buy it and you can qualify now and you think your job is somewhat secure, buy now. If you're a seller, because of the uncertainty, it's better to take profit than not take profit and potentially take a loss. So if you're selling, probably not a bad time to sell. Buying, it depends. You could sit on the fence, but there are pluses and minuses to doing so. Hopefully this gives everyone some thoughts to think about on our Calgary market. The old Chinese curse of, I wish that you live in interesting times. Well, we're definitely living in interesting times. I don't know whether our current federal government will last the first quarter of 2025. They're only propped up by other governments because of political gains or financial gains, because if they stay long enough in power, their pensions click in and they make some money. It's not for the benefit of Canadians, in my belief. Benefit for Canadians, let's restart, put a government that can take on what is the right-wing Trump machine. Obviously, he's controlled by the House and the Senate down there, so he can't do all the things that he says he wants to do. And you don't want to be fighting economic fronts of all the BRIC countries and your North American compatriots all at the same time. No country has ever won fighting a multi-front war, whether a heated war. This was more an economic war. So see how it unfolds. We'll chat some more in January. Otherwise, have a great Christmas, happy holidays, and hope to hear from you. Please reach out to me at hrh.ca, realestate.ca, or give me a ring, 403-472-0608, and we can chat some more on some thought processes. It's going to be interesting. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye now.